I'm doing a review for this book, Squaring the Circle, edited by Soo Downe and Sheena Byrom. Hey, this book is very good and very important, and I hope it's taken as seriously as it should be. This book is a manifesto for maternity care. I think the aims of this book to square the circle of maternity care needs and practice are both admirable and urgent. How many more generations are going to have to put up with the drip down effect of gentler maternity support, which is proven again and again to be the most effective, with the swooping in of new technologies which earn their pride of place based on their monetary value, but can often be a hindrance rather than a help. This book is a correlation of scientific papers with many contributors, bringing together a compelling and convincing evidence-based argument for changes in maternity services. The book is laid out as categorised scientific papers, all with introductions, explanations, conclusions, and points for consideration. This segmented the book well and gradually brought together all the different angles of the square stroke circle. This book covers important areas surrounding birth, such as the thin evidence for internal examination accuracy, as well as similarly or more reliable methods of assessing women's progress in labour. It talks about the difference in preventing death and encouraging health in all aspects of medical care, but maternity care particularly. I made a record number of notes when I was reading this book, and there was lots of information that was well phrased and explained, and here are just a few quotes. So, on preemptive diagnosis and treatment of potential risk, page 11. This is in reference to healthcare generally, but I thought its accuracy was worth highlighting. The promise is that this will ensure the optimum health of the population, and especially a healthy old age, even if the identification of potential but not actual risk is associated with an increase in anxiety and a reduction in social, psychological and/or emotional well-being. Page 13. The paradox of the rapid introduction of technical solutions in maternity care and the slow or minimal rollout of equally or more effective relationship-based solutions is the context in which this book is set. Page 38. Despite its long-standing and routine use, there is little evidence of the reliability or effectiveness of vaginal examination, and is found to be correct in only 19% and 56% of cases. Did you know that when you agreed to it, ladies? On highlighting the weaknesses of scientific research, page 77. Knowledge that is generated by hands-on experience, by messy interactions with people and with events, and by intuitive understandings and decisions is dismissed as being biased or unscientific. On safety versus satisfaction, page 80, subtle, positive, longer-term outcomes such as capacity to parent or maternal and infant well-being are rarely measured in routine assessment of care delivery. Page 102. The focus on exceptional and singular incidents where harm has already occurred in an effort to improve safety outcomes in the future for all women and their babies is problematic. It means that routine care is planned around evidence collected from just a small number of exceptional cases. Planning maternity care using hindsight to examine poor outcomes that have already occurred means that the avoidance of extremely rare risks of significant harm takes precedence over the much more common risks of morbidity and of overuse of just-in-case intervention. Through institutional mechanisms, risk management becomes a focal point for strict behavioural restrictions on the woman and on her caregivers during pregnancy and labour. Page 105. In maternity care, this means that the minimisation of risk through interventions is assumed to inevitably improve the outcomes for mother and baby. One of the risk surveillance techniques utilised during labour in many maternity units across the world, regardless of risk status, is continuous electronic fetal heart monitoring, brackets EFM. This surveillance promises to minimise risk, in spite of evidence showing that the introduction of EFM has done little to improve neonatal outcomes. It is also associated with increased rates of operative birth and consequent iatrogenic morbidity. Despite this evidence, the implied but not actual promise of reduced risk is considered more important than, for example, a woman's desire to move around unencumbered. In my case, I was told I wasn't allowed to leave the bed when I asked. On the emerging area of human rights and applying them specifically to birth, page 123, constraining women to labour and give birth, supine or lithotomy position, with no consent, explanation and for no good reason, does not fulfil the right to be free from torture or other cruel, inhuman and degrading treatment or scientific experimentation. It seems reasonable that the right to education should include applicability to education about evidence-based healthcare, including childbirth. On the worldwide increasing rates of induction over the last 20 years, page 167, it is biologically implausible that 1/3 or even 1/2 of pregnant women need to have their labour induced for their health or for the health of their baby. It is arguably reckless to expose so many women and babies to such an intervention without knowing the long-term consequences. There was a lot in this book about the architecture of birth settings, and this is more relevant than it could at first seem. As the book explains, birth settings are usually alongside hospitals and have traditionally been built and decorated in the same manner. But birth is different to everything else that happens in a hospital. Most people are in hospital because they are sick. Birth is not a sickness, and as this book explains, women feeling like patients is likely to be detrimental to their labour and birth. Being a patient is disempowering. Labouring women need the opposite. They need to feel comfortable, with privacy and a feeling of control, whether they are low or high risk. Midwives can be an advocate for this. So research shows that, as quoted on page 184, women wanted an environment that felt welcoming and private and looked recognisably different from the usual hospital setting. Again, this reiterates how different birth is from usual hospital business. Page 260, women's access to midwife-led continuity of care in developed countries is varied, despite high-level evidence that continuity of care by a primary midwife is associated with reduced childbirth intervention, improved neonatal outcomes, reduced costs to organisations and the healthcare system, increased maternal satisfaction, and evidence of positive outcomes for midwives working in these models. Page 282. The combined evidence from the Lancet Midwifery series papers showed the extensive reach and scale of the impact of midwifery, and specifically the work of professional midwives on the survival, health and well-being of women and infants. The impact of full-scope midwifery provided by professional midwives who are educated, regulated and integrated into the health system dwarfs the impact of other interventions. Its universal implementation could reduce stillbirths and deaths of women and newborn infants by more than 80%, as well as substantially improving the lives of those who survive. It truly is a vital solution needed by all women and all infants in all countries. On page 297, the book discusses the paradigm shift to deliver healthier lives instead of preventing death. And there are case studies of implementation. A uniquely strong point of this book was the final section on implementation. This book is not just highlighting the problems and offering solutions, it goes further. It offers practical advice for implementing the ideas, with case studies demonstrating ways it can be done. I was very impressed with that. As with all the book, it shows how much thought and planning has gone into it. The editors of the book are serious about changing maternity care, and this book shows it to be beneficial and achievable. This book is convincing and comprehensive, from ancient wisdom and experience of normal birth, to traditional scientific research and trials, to the newer areas of human rights during birth and the use of big data. This book tackles all angles to argue for midwife-led continuity of care for all women. It gives a critical evaluation of current maternity services and how to move forward to achieve better outcomes for all, with constructive suggestions on how to achieve this. So, who should read this book? This isn't your average birth book. I wouldn't recommend it for expectant mums. It is a medical book, so if you have a particular interest in birth or health, then I would recommend it. It is a particularly valuable book to anyone working in maternity care, as well as postnatal care. It would also be of great value to other people working in health, right down to GPs, and also people working in health planning and policy, right up to government departments. There are many books on the market which convincingly argue for the benefits of normal birth, but I haven't read one before that is so evidence-based, and I was impressed with the content. I really hope it appeals to people working in the medical sphere, because women giving birth need carers to be on board with prioritising normal birth when possible. This is a very strong book, and it reminds me how strong we women are, and that instead of using our strength to endure current maternity practices, we should be using our strength to achieve what we deserve. I want to give a final well done to the creators of the book, because I think that they achieved their aim. They have laid it out extraordinarily well, and I can't wait for the day when it is in action. And this book helps me to believe in that reality. Okay, there it is again. Thank you.